Smackdown Live is in the books, and now I'm joined by the newest member to the WWE Podcast family, Zach Perez. We go over all of Smackdown Live and his new podcast right after this. Okay, so you guys love podcasts. You're listening to one right now. I've got a really good one for you. It's actually hilarious. It's called Shoot from the Hip. There are three co-hosts. It's Matt, Lancer, and Bryan. They talk about ridiculous things like why knees aren't just called leg knuckles, some conspiracy theories, dealing with embarrassment, back to school. There are so many different topics that really are just crazy, but are really entertaining. And actually, they have 5 stars right now on Apple Podcasts. So I would really recommend that you check them out. They're absurd but hilarious topics. And new episodes drop every single week at sfthpodcast.com. And you can kind of tell, this is going to be one of those shows that shoots quickly up the rankings. So get on board now. Check out Shoot from the Hip Podcast. You can find them seriously anywhere, right? Like, just go to iHeartRadio, Google Music, Stitcher, SoundCloud. They're also on all the social media platforms. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and their website, which is sfthpodcast.com. And on Twitter, you can check them out at hipshotpodcast.com. Also on YouTube at Shoot from the Hip Podcast. So check them out today, guys. I really think that you'll enjoy the show and get a kick out of it. I listened to one of their shows just before this recording of my podcast, and I'm telling you right now, I was laughing out loud. Some of the stuff that they talk about it's so off the wall, but it's so well done and genuinely funny. So check out Shoot from the Hip Podcast. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome to the WWE Podcast, your place for the most passionate wrestling analysis on the web.
Just turn Roman heel. What is WWE waiting for?
When other wrestling podcasts put you to sleep, you can count on the WWE Podcast to keep you engaged and asking for more.
I've been watching wrestling for over 20 years, and that was one of the best matches I've ever seen.
This is unlike any other wrestling analysis. So without any further delay, let's get the show started right now.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. This is the WWE Podcast on this Wednesday, August 28th, 2019. We're going to get to Smackdown Live. We're going to get to the new AEW Podcast coming to the show with my new host of the show, Zach Perez. And he will be doing his own AEW Podcast that will be broadcast here on the WWE Network. So I will not be co-hosting that show, for those that are asking. But I'm looking forward to it. And it's going to be a crazy fall. I've mentioned that before, but we all know with AEW starting in the Wednesday Night Wars. And it's going to be a blast. And I think Zach Perez is going to be a great addition to the family. And I think you'll enjoy it. And to cover AEW is going to be... I wish I could do it. I wish I could join him, but time is of the essence, and I just simply don't have the time. But I know he'll do a great job, so definitely give him a try. I think you'll enjoy it. The first show of his will drop this weekend after All Out, so take a look out for that. And also, I will be on vacation next week, so I'll be taking a trip all week. I'll be in Maine all week. But I'm going to try to, and I will make sure that those of you that are those contributors who are sending me articles are still published on the site. And, of course, Zach's show being published. And I'm going to try to do at least one show during the week. And maybe I'll run a best of show where I take some old episodes out of the archive and recycle them for you guys to listen to. But I do want to do a new show for you guys next week, at least just one. And I know my wife is making sure that I'm spending time with the family and not on my computer and recording my podcast. So there's that too. But I do need to make sure that you guys get my content, but I just wanted to give you guys a heads up where I'll be next week. So, well, guys, don't forget, check out the website at WWEpodcast.com. And if you don't want any ads in this show, it's an easy solution. You head on over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast, where every single show that I do gets put into the ears of you, for a ad-free listening experience. And that's always an easy, smooth experience when you don't have to skip ahead or just kind of go through the ads. But it is an ad-free experience for you to enjoy if you want to do that. Or if you just want the free feed, you can go really anywhere that this show is available, Spreaker or Stitcher or SoundCloud or TuneIn or, iHeartRadio. I don't need to go through the entire list, but y'all know where this show lives. So one other thing I want to talk to you guys about, and it's really important because I am such a passionate fantasy football fan. Like, I love it. And it's football season again, right? And it's almost the MLB playoffs. So just keep in mind that when you're doing DraftKings and things like that, there are other alternatives out there that are even better than DraftKings. I mean, DraftKings is no doubt successful, but I really only recommend a service to my listeners that's proven. And that's why MyBookie is always the right play. You bet, you win, and they pay. It's that easy. MyBookie has live in-game betting on every NFL game. Every one. And they've got the most rewarding player perks in the business. And for you fantasy guys out there, you can even bet on the over or under on many fantasy points, how many of fantasy points a player will score each game. So here's what you need to do. Very simple. I'll make this quick. You can get up to $1,000 in your first deposit bonus. You can double your first deposit. And all you have to do is use 3 easy letters when you sign up. It's use the promo code WWE. That's all you have to do to activate this offer. So just go to MyBookie online today. That's MyBookie. And just don't forget to use the WWE promo code when you're creating your account, and that's how you get your bonus. So you just bet, you win, and you get paid. Super easy. So I just would really recommend you check that out. I'm on there. I'm doing okay. Betting on separate thing. Obviously, football's not started yet, but once that starts, man, it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lucrative season for me. I have that feeling. At least maybe I'm overconfident. But all right, well, guys, let's get to the conversation with Zach Perez, our newest host of the show that has his own AEW podcast starting this weekend and then doing a weekly show as AEW has their weekly show starting every Wednesday in October. So, guys, enjoy your night, evening, morning, and I will talk to you soon. All right, and welcome back, guys. Right now, I have someone new to introduce to you. His name is Zach Perez, and he will be your new host of the AEW Podcast under the WWE Podcast umbrella that I'm super excited to start getting rolling. And so without further ado, Zach, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to get everything started here and get everything up and rolling.
Yeah, me too. And with like I said this before, that I am just super excited about this fall because it has so much wrestling content that I don't care how much of an ardent or hardcore fan you are, you're going to get more than your fill starting in October. So I'm excited to have you on board and excited to have you at a time that it is great to be a wrestling fan.
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like now more than ever, you can't possibly get too much wrestling. It's like you can look anywhere and find good content. You've got New Japan now with streaming services. ROH is still trying to hang on there with streaming services. And now, AEW has taken the best of just about everything from the independents and throwing it into one, super promotion with millions of dollars behind it. It seems like a video game scenario,
It really does. It's absolutely crazy. And, this is like the first time since the Golden Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars ended that it actually feels like true competition is starting to bubble back up. So, but before we get into that, I want to give you a little bit of time to introduce yourself to the audience and, hey, just let them know, how did you become a wrestling fan and maybe some of your favorite moments?
Yeah, so I've been a wrestling fan basically as old as I could turn on a television. I used to sit there and watch it with my dad, especially being a 90s kid, the Attitude Era was just a huge shaping point in my personality, everything, it was a huge part of my life. It was like an extended family with a lot of extra tables and all that good stuff, but it just really has always been something that I've always gone back to, and I've had different moments where I've fallen out of it, but, looking back at some of the moments like, the TLC TLC matches with the Hardy Boys and the Dudleys and just about everything that ever happened in ECW, really. I'm a glutton for weapons and all that sort of wrestling, so that's always something I mark out a little bit for. But I've been a wrestling fan for so long, and I remember even back, you're local to me. I remember on the river the one time I actually won some wrestling tickets when I was about 5 years old during a promo contest. So that's how far back my roots go in wrestling.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can relate. And I've been here living in upstate New York all my life, and I actually won tickets to No Mercy 2000 when it was at the Pepsi Arena. I think it was to Pepsi. It might have been the Knickerbocker Arena at the time. But it was at the Great Escape up in Lake George. They were doing a contest, and whoever won this contest, you had to imitate wrestlers. They won tickets to the pay-per-view that following weekend, and so I ended up winning. And so, yeah, I mean, wrestling has been the biggest part of my life, as probably is yours. So now, so you've been a wrestling fan for the majority of your life. Do you have, kind of basic question, but it's, I think, worth asking, do you have a favorite wrestler, and who may that be?
I always have to go back to, in terms of the biggest wrestler that, kind of I would always mark out for and everything like that, because it's always such a big question when you ask favorite wrestler, because there's so many categories that go into that, promos, matches, but just overall what I got most excited for is kind of the measure that I go by. So I always go back to saying The Rock, the promos, the matches, it always felt like a big match feel. It always felt like you were watching a Mike Tyson fight when you saw The Rock come out. It was just always so electric and charismatic. It's just always who I go back to as my number one favorite, with a close second being Stone Cold, of course.
Yeah, I know, and I say the same thing, and people are like, "Oh, that's not interesting." I'm like, "Well, it is what it is." I mean, these guys were the biggest in the industry ever for a reason, right? So, I mean, it's not the most interesting choice and the most clever or unique or standout, but I don't care. I mean, Stone Cold was my top, and The Rock was my second. So, yeah, I totally understand now. So, transitioning a little bit into AEW, a very new promotion, and the topic that you'll be covering, which, by the way, guys, will be dropping every Thursday following the Wednesday show, starting when the weekly shows start in October, but with the All Out pay-per-view coming up on the 31st, just a few days away, we'll also have that coverage from Zach, so stay tuned here. Now, but with AEW being the newest and hottest promotion, obviously social media seemed to be the way of advertising this, and I really don't believe AEW would have been as successful to date, and again, very small sample size, without social media. What's drawing you to AEW?
It's pretty interesting. AEW was kind of what brought me back to wrestling. I've always had a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the direction of the product and everything. Like I said, being a bigger fan of things like ECW and the TLC matches and the Attitude Era. I didn't like the direction of the product it was going when it started to move to PG in the WWE, and I always kind of kept an eye on the independents, hoping that something big would happen there. And then what really drew me into AEW was just the kind of punk rock-esque vibe around it, where it's just this counterculture promotion to WWE. It's going the exact opposite direction. It's bringing back the wrestling-first kind of wrestling that I fell in love with from a young age, and seeing those kind of things, and even like the chair shot to Cody Rhodes. I know a lot of people gave criticism to that, but I loved the fact that they were willing to do those sort of risks on such a big platform. It's not like they're just in front of a high school gym doing these sort of spots and doing this crazy stuff. They're actually in front of a global audience now doing these sort of things, and that just kind of made me fall back in love with wrestling all over again.
It did. I agree with that, and it brings you back to what's brought you to the dance to begin with. It's back to fundamentals. It's really not that hard to understand why AEW's gotten the success that it has so far. It's because it's wrestling on a wrestling show rather than the entertainment part of the sports entertainment genre, which is more than eye-rolling at times with WWE, although it's starting to improve in small doses. So, with AEW on the horizon, their All Out pay-per-view coming up, the biggest news coming out of that I just have to ask, is Jon Moxley, who is now no longer a part of that show because of MRSA and, he's going to need surgery, and so it's not career-threatening, but it is certainly taking him out of the game to face Kenny Omega. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, in the short term, sure, it's devastating, but is there any way you could put a positive spin on this?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was actually supposed to make it out to the NEW show that he was at not too long ago when he actually wrestled through the elbow injury. And from what I've heard from a lot of people who did end up going to that, thankfully the rainstorm kept me from going to it because apparently he was kind of suffering through it a little bit, and it didn't seem like he was really, at 100%. I guess a lot of crowd brawling and, hideaway spot sort of situations there. But I think that this is actually a good thing for the grand scheme for AEW, because him being out of that show, him having so much hype behind him, I feel like they were really overshadowing the main event. With having Jericho versus Page for the AEW Championship, that should really feel like a major event and a major focus of the pay-per-view. And I feel like the crowd would have been died down a little bit after watching Moxley versus Omega. So I think this will be a good way for them to have something stored in the chamber, an extra bullet for when it comes time for television, and something to really fire back on with a good build-up and a good feud.
Definitely, and while I'm not as intricately involved in the AEW podcast, hence why you are doing your own show and obviously very talented and knowledgeable about the AEW brand already, what is the match now that the Moxley and Kenny Omega match is no longer? Is there a match that you're most looking forward to?
I really think that the potential match of the night is going to actually be the triple threat with Darby Allin, Jimmy Havoc, and Joey Janela. I think that's going to be really interesting, right up my alley. Like I said, I like the more hardcore style of wrestling, and I was really, really impressed by the match that Darby Allin had with Cody Rhodes. So I think that coming out of that is going to be a real showcase for some of the younger talent, and I feel like that match, because of the story that they've built around it, where they kind of had a falling out in a tag team match, which is just brilliant old school storytelling, I think that it's already has a little bit of interesting heat behind it, and they could go some different directions, and nobody's really established as a guaranteed face or heel yet, so it leaves open a lot of things. And one of the things that I'm most excited about too, that's not necessarily a match, but the fact that they said they only released 40% of their roster, kind of leaves some openings for some surprise appearances. Hopefully CM Punk. A million people have said that already, but that could definitely be a good way to cap off the show for sure.
Definitely, and so that was actually going to be my final question to you on for the AEW front here. Would be, do you see CM Punk? It's kind of a double-edged question here. So, do you see CM Punk making an appearance at All Out, and if not, do you see him ever making an appearance in AEW for a one-off match?
I really think that, putting on my tinfoil hat here, of course, I think that I really feel CM Punk is going to be involved with AEW in some capacity or another. Does he appear at All Out? I think that the probability is pretty high. I think that, I just recently saw that Grilling JR tomorrow morning actually is going to be about CM Punk. Starcast appearance, and there's just so many things that kind of push towards it. And the fact that they already had some barbs back and forth on social media, saying, somebody shouldn't have just texted me an offer and everything. It just kind of feels like they're playing a cat and mouse game with the hype of CM Punk coming into AEW. So I think they're probably gauging interest. Should we go ahead and release him at All Out? Should we not? I really feel as if that it's something that's going to happen, if not on Saturday, then definitely sometime soon.
That would be a massive coup for AEW, and not just because it's CM Punk, but WWE, regardless of what has happened with them in the past, what happened like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, they would still love to have Punk on their side, in their grasp, under their thumb, not for a full-time schedule. No, I think Punk is beyond that with his age, and he has nothing left to prove, really. But for them to just get Punk, not just because he's a good grab, but to take it away from WWE, would put so much attention on AEW from a social media perspective, I just can't imagine what social media would look like if Punk appears at All Out, and to take the buzz away from WWE in a huge way. For Punk to return to wrestling for the first time in 6 years would be absolutely just insanity for AEW, and I'm sure that Vince McMahon has to know that. As much as he doesn't want to say AEW's competition, they're competition because they're in the same genre trying to compete for the same audience.
Exactly, yeah. And I just feel like that would be such a low blow to Vince, especially after I really feel like Jon Moxley, killing Dean Ambrose was kind of a real ego killer for Vince, and I don't think he wants to see that, especially CM Punk has always had such a not even a love-hate relationship, more like a tolerate-hate relationship with the WWE, even during his time there. And they never really let him be the big guy that he always was. So I think that the attraction of having something like AEW that's so kind of, putting the middle finger up to WWE in a lot of ways, like Cody hitting the throne, before his match. I think that Punk is the perfect person to kind of embody that, just like Moxley was.
He really is. And people have been talking about this return since he first appeared on the Colt Cabana podcast and told his story, and the internet just blew up from what he said and the inner workings of WWE. And the scary part is that not much changed when Moxley or Ambrose did the exact same thing on Chris Jericho's podcast a couple of months ago. It's just eerily representative and paralleled one another to just more all but confirm of what the backstage environment was like and is like to this day. So, but transitioning a little bit into WWE, now you mentioned you just had recently got back into wrestling, so take us through your last few months as a WWE fan. Before we get into SmackDown Live, which we'll get into, bringing yourself back to WWE, what are your thoughts overall of the product? I mean, we have Paul Heyman and we have Eric Bischoff, the head of Raw and the head of the SmackDown creative or production or executive president of production, whatever silly title they gave them. Do you see any change from when they have both, quote, officially started in those positions? And what's your kind of overall feeling of WWE?
Yeah, so I basically came back to the product and started watching more intently. I always kind of kept a distant eye on it, but I came more intently back into the product recently around Money in the Bank pay-per-view. So it's kind of the perfect timing to see the transformation, and I feel like Raw has gotten significantly better since then, especially I feel like there's a lot of Paul Heyman influence into the way that they're doing things now. It definitely seems like they are going away from the really drawn out introductions and the 15-20 minute promos to lead into wrestling, and I like the fact that when Heyman took over, you started to see that there would be wrestling matches at the beginning of the card and not always such long-winded storytelling that was kind of shoved down your throat when you're just getting ready to watch a wrestling show. So that was kind of refreshing for me to see something that was going back towards my favorite style of wrestling, letting the storytelling be a part of it, but not so much the forefront, letting the wrestlers wrestle, as crazy an idea as that is.
It's become a foreign idea, and it's weird now when you see, and I'm still not used to it, when Raw starts on Monday night and you don't have a promo. I mean, you just get right into the matches and you're like, whoa, this is weird. Shouldn't somebody be coming out to set up the main event in some long-winded, unnecessarily extended period of time to just set up the main event? I mean, and then to see wrestling on a wrestling show, it feels weird, and it shouldn't, but it does, but not in a bad way. And Paul Heyman putting his fingerprints all over Raw, I think he's doing it in a very subtle and slow and steady pace, which is the best way to do this. People expected radical change. Like some people were thinking, everything's going to be overhauled Monday once the announcement was made. And anybody who knows anything about a business, especially one of the caliber and the distinction of WWE, would know that that's not a smart idea, because the entire product is not broken. There's just fundamentally several things that need to be changed, but you can't do it all at once. It's not smart to do it all at once. You need to just take things step by step. You need to just do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, and then take the audience along that journey and let them know you're listening and do those small changes, so that then normalizes what they're seeing and not just this, boom, you go from black to white. And that's what I'm seeing on a weekly basis, are just small things in storytelling cohesiveness, in match quality and match length, less backstage stuff, less terrible attempts at comedy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was one of the biggest things, too, is that Vince has heavily tried, once the product went PG, to throw in this really odd sophomoric humor. And, it used to work much better in the Attitude Era, when you had some freedom with the way that you could say things, and, you were letting the wrestlers kind of do their own thing and say, be comedic, as opposed to say, these are the words that 20 writers sat and toiled over for a week and decided this is the funny thing that you're going to say. Like Moxley said on the podcast with Jericho about the pooper scooper and all of that. It shows in the product that he's got this influence that isn't always the best thing. And I think having a mind like Heyman, that he's come to clash with so much that he initially left the company not long ago, it kind of shows that he's lessening his grip on it at just the right time, because the viewership was starting to show the fact that it wasn't his influence that was helping. He needed to kind of step back a little bit and let some other minds talk him out of rewriting the script every week and things like that.
Right, and the thing is, too, that that the writers, a lot of the time, and I don't know if it was Moxley who said this, or it might have been on Grill and JR, that the writers oftentimes are writing for Vince. They're writing to please the boss and not necessarily what would be best for the product. And that can be a very dangerous thing to do. Why even bother writing when Vince McMahon is ultimately just going to be the filter anyway, which was what I was worried about when Bischoff and Heyman were put in their positions, that, yeah, they're at the head of the creative, but ultimately, guess who has the final say? Vince McMahon. And if he will not truly step back, not just in this press release, but in actuality, in execution, step back and let things change a little bit and not just be the final filter, then ultimately you will see change. But the problem has been, and was for years, and when you stepped away, was, hey, we're the writers, we have a job, we're employed by Vince. Vince is involved intimately in the creative on a daily basis. Let's do what pleases him, and we'll do what we know he likes, which is, again, you're writing for the boss. You're not writing for the product, which does a huge disservice to the product, and we saw the results over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think when you really look at it, I think that Raw is the program that is changing the most. Apparently Bischoff has got less of a hands-on role. From what I've read, it's kind of that he's more helping with the network negotiations back and forth with Fox in terms of getting it prepared for what the product should be like for Fox and in time for their debut there. So I think you can kind of see where Raw has gotten a little bit more cohesive. Raw has kind of come together and done things more in a different light instead of trying to force storytelling. And I think Smackdown still kind of has that Vince McMahon influence, where you see more of that, and a lot of reports coming that he kind of rips up the script right before the show every week on Smackdown. It kind of shows, I feel, what he's doing there is he knows that it's going to be going on to Fox, and he knows that he kind of has to impress the network executives over there with the Smackdown brand, because it was always for so long that Raw was the A show, Smackdown was the B show, and of course now that you have a deal with Fox, you can't really make that the case. So I think he's kind of hyper focusing on SmackDown and influencing that more so, and so he's lessening his grip on Raw, but he's still the control freak that everybody knows when it comes time for SmackDown, and I think that'll only get worse when Fox actually does take over that show.
Oh, no question. You mean, look, Fox is the biggest television deal they've ever had in their lives, and you don't think they're taking it seriously? Of course they are. I mean, I'm sure that there are provisions in that contract with Fox that says you have to keep the ratings at X amount, or you'll be pulled from the network and put on Fox Sports 1 or one of their affiliate stations that are not in as many homes. So there are absolutely parameters in that contract. You can absolutely bank on that. But with Bischoff, yeah, he is not as intimately involved because he admittedly was not watching the product as much as he probably should have been before putting in this position. So with a lot of catch-up to do with Bischoff, there's not going to be that immediate response and immediate change that you're seeing like you are on Raw, and I think that's a good point to bring up, because with Paul Heyman, he's been back with the company, I mean, for how many years now? I mean, Brock returned in 2012, and Heyman is there even when Brock is not. So, yeah, Heyman has a much better feel for the pulse of what the audience is saying and feeling, and I'm sure as much as they say they don't look at social media too, they're looking at social media and what the fans are saying. So there's never been a better time to get that focus group reaction, that instant reaction and feeling from fans on what is working and what is not. And so Paul Heyman is making a more immediate impact because he's been involved in the product from a day-to-day, year-to-year basis, where Bischoff has been pretty much removed from that product. So, yeah, I think for SmackDown Live, you're going to see a very even slower, if not probably take months up to a year to see any true change. But it has 2 hours going for it, which is always a good thing, versus Raw's Marathon 3.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's going to, only get worse over time too, with the Vince's involvement and things like that. It's one of those things that he's kind of always been a contrarian to that social media influence. He kind of looks at it and it's almost like he dismisses it and wants to do his own thing even more. So I think that Paul Heyman is much a contrarian to him as he is to his belief system. So he's going to be much more that person who looks into it and really actually reacts to what the fans are looking for.
Definitely. So, but speaking of it, let's get into SmackDown Live. An eventful show, a confusing show, and I'll just start off with what we were last shown, and that was the Roman Reigns mystery attacker just now getting very convoluted story that, we saw the highlights week after week after week at nauseum, multiple times a show on the Roman Reigns whodunit. And it was believed to be Daniel Bryan, but then it's Rowan, and then it's Rowan's lookalike, but then now Roman speared Bryan on SmackDown Live, so we still don't know who did it. What do you think about this whole deal, and do you think it was ultimately Daniel Bryan that tried to attack and end the career of Roman Reigns?
So I have, my theory that I think is true and my theory that I wish was true when it comes to this. So I think that the ultimate payoff is going to be that, the actual reality is that it's going to be Daniel Bryan. It's not going to be too complex with the way that they get to that conclusion. I think it's just going to kind of be basically, yep, Rowan did it, and he tried to hide the fact that Daniel Bryan was involved, and that's why he was okay with getting slapped, the taste out of his mouth, that night, and just letting that happen. So I think that he's going to basically be behind it. It's not going to have too much complexity. I think they're kind of drawing it out because they don't really have a big bang conclusion to finish this with. But my wishful thinking is that it actually ends up being a kind of conspired to commit the crime between Daniel Bryan, Rowan, and Buddy Murphy. And Buddy Murphy, basically, the reason why he said Rowan and the reason why they instantly called him a liar was the fact that they knew he was involved, but the whole point was to hide Daniel Bryan away so that he wasn't actually the one to get fingered for the crime. So it's kind of more that Rowan and Buddy Murphy were the ones doing the dirty work, and they were supposed to hide the fact that Bryan was involved, and that's why they got so pissed when Buddy Murphy was the one who revealed it. And I think that could set up a really interesting maybe Buddy Murphy versus Daniel Bryan versus Roman Reigns kind of situation, so you can kind of have some different lines drawn besides besides just saying, oh, it's Daniel Bryan, they're going to have a match at Clash of Champions.
Look, so while I would like to see your version of how this plays out, I think ultimately it's going to be the straightforward that Bryan was the mastermind, that he was the evil genius behind, as you said, kind of the henchmen, the ones that get their hands dirty and do the work for the guy that's actually behind it. He's kind of like the Charles Manson of this story, and he doesn't actually commit the crime, but he is the mastermind behind it. And so, yeah, I mean, whether it's Rowan and his evil twin look-alike that did it, and a combination of him and Buddy Murphy, I think somehow, some way, all of them are involved in some strange way. But it all comes back to, and all roads lead to, Daniel Bryan being the culprit, being that evil mastermind. And it does, I think, end in a match at Clash of Champions with Roman and Daniel Bryan. I think that's just how it has to end. But to me, more importantly, is not just the who done it, it's the why was it done, all right? So, like, what is Daniel Bryan's motivation for doing this? And the only thing I can think of is that Daniel Bryan was involved with Roman Reigns back in 2015, 2016, and that Roman Reigns took the spot of the beloved Daniel Bryan at the time, who the fans decided to choose, and yet Roman Reigns was the guy that the company went with. The only problem with that would be it would then stir up the emotions of the fans again, and maybe all the goodwill and the booing of Roman Reigns would then be stirred up again. And I know that Vince McMahon wants nothing to do with that, but that's the only logical thing I can think of is their history, right, from 4 years ago. Outside of that, I don't know what the motive would be. Do you have any idea what it possibly could be?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because in order for them to really accomplish that, it would kind of almost need to have a double turn kind of situation. It kind of, to sell it accurately, it would almost kind of be that Roman would have to take the role of the heel and Daniel Bryan would have to take the role of the face. Other than the fact that he did attempt murder on him, the fan support is going to, like you said, divide that story in a very interesting direction. So I almost wonder if the announcement that never happened with Daniel Bryan on Smackdown, I wonder what that was going to be. And I feel like there is going to be some sort of tie-in to that, and why he didn't end up announcing it, where he just kind of came out and stuttered. And I think there'll be some sort of bigger, grander storyline. Maybe he's been masterminding some sort of stable or faction or something like that. But I would love to see something really deep in a bigger storyline develop out of this, because I feel like Daniel Bryan has been selling this so well. And it's funny that you said Charles Manson, because that's really the vibes that I've been getting off of the way that he delivers his promos and the intensity in his eyes and the fact that he's kind of smacking around his disciple Rowan now. It just all kind of has these very hyper-violent, crazy-minded individual feel. And I think that something has kind of snapped in Daniel Bryan one way or another, and that's going to be kind of the greater motive behind it, is that he's lost his sanity in some way to the business.
And I think that's a point that's lost, right, is how good Daniel Bryan has been. He's transformed from this beloved underdog that had the most feel-good story at WrestleMania 30 to this guy that, you said he'll never turn heel, people will never boo him. And he accomplished that, and he turned into this obnoxious vegan, save the world guy, holier than thou, I'm better than you because you're destroying the planet and I'm here to help it. And he was the planet's tag team. He was the planet's champions with Rowan as the tag team champions. And then he morphed, as you said, and I didn't really make that connection of Charles Manson type of look and feel, but he has that vibe, and he has that just crazy look in his eye, the way he gets in people's faces when he talks. He doesn't necessarily scream, but he's got that far out, that, the lights are on, but nobody's home look in their eye, and that is not an easy thing to master. I mean, I don't know where this evil Daniel Bryan has been, but it's almost like he's under some kind of psychosis, and he gets in these trances, and I just love it. And I think right now that's kind of being lost on the whole, well, who attacked Roman? There's a lot of other things happening here, not just the motive, but the fact that Daniel Bryan is morphing slowly into this, and just psychotic character that's descending down further and further and further. And it could end up being a stable. Sure, Luke Harper has been rumored to come back for months and months now. And if he joins the stable, fine. I think he'd be a fine addition to then, be the third wheel in this triage. I'm fine with it. But yeah, I mean, it's just being lost on just how good Daniel Bryan is right now as a heel.
Yeah, I really feel like it's almost like the spirit of Bruiser Brody gets into Daniel Bryan when he's out there now. It's just the way he sells the crazed look and the way that he really gets you to feel as if no matter how crazy, like this whole storyline to me started off on a really rough note with the pushed over boxes onto Roman. And I feel like just Daniel Bryan's sheer will to make this work has kind of driven this storyline forward. And it really does feel like he gets this other persona out of him now, where it's like he just draws so much power from his words, and like you said, the lights on but nobody's home look, and the dazed off kind of disconnection from what's happening, and the whole Rowan twin thing, that was a little bit contrived, a little bit kind of where are they going with this, but the fact that Daniel Bryan just kind of looked around as if there was no other possibility, but this was the man who did it, and then having him get absolutely crazy when it might have been Rowan after all, it just, he sells it so well that he makes a bad storyline a memorable storyline, and that's a unique talent.
And yes, and the one fear I have, though, is out of this whole thing that it's revealed to be Daniel Bryan somehow, some way. There's extra footage. Maybe it's GTV comes back. I don't know. But somehow, some way, it's revealed that Bryan is the mastermind. Or maybe he did it himself. There's footage of him driving the car or something, whatever. My concern is that this leads to a match at Clash of Champions only to have him fed to Roman Reigns. There's no real beneficiary other than Roman Reigns going over again, and Roman Reigns winning again, and overachieving again, and getting retribution. And we've seen that over and over and over, and there needs to be some other alternative motive here from the writers and from creative, other than just let's have Roman win because he's the face of our brand. It needs to be something else that is the goal here, because Roman doesn't need the victory. We've seen that kind of story play out with Roman before. He gets retribution in the end, he wins. Okay, we've seen it. So my concern is that this just does nothing other than a spear and a victory for Roman Reigns, and Daniel Bryan goes back down into the abyss of just no man's land, and they don't have any real plans for him beyond Clash of Champions.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I got especially fearful for at the end of the show when you saw Daniel Bryan just kind of get ripped in half by Roman's spear. It just kind of felt like, oh God, don't let this be the direction that they're going, that it's just going to turn into this Daniel Bryan putting over Roman Reigns for no real reason. I mean, he doesn't need that push at this point. That's why I really would like to see, even if it's not Buddy Murphy in my kind of crazy convoluted theory, I would like to see a third person be involved in this somehow. The fact that the two attacks were done and carried out in a different manner leads to that possibility, and they haven't done any real footage of the actual car accident portion of it. It's all focused on the pushing over the boxes. So I'd like to see them do something a little more complex, maybe bring in somebody younger who could really use a boost and have them beat both Roman and Daniel, or some combination of both, so that it doesn't just end up being Roman takes over and wins, or Daniel Bryan being forced into an awkward situation where he has to try and put him over while defeating him.
Exactly. I mean, they put so much time into this whole thing that the payoff is ultimately going to be, and has to be, really Daniel Bryan as the culprit, right? I mean, it just feels that way. It would, if there is a third person, that's fine, but Daniel Bryan to me seems to be the focal point versus Roman Reigns here, and they put so much stock into this, and so much time, and so many replays of it. It's getting to the point of, like, I actually turn away or skip ahead because I've seen this video a million times. I don't need to see it over and over. But the fact that they're doing that so much and spending so much time on Smackdown and on Raw for the last month and a half of the whodunit that there needs to be something, and there has to, you would hope and think and wish and pray that there is something bigger here other than just Roman overcoming another obstacle, which would be like every other story he's done ever. So I don't need that at the expense of all of the progress that Daniel Bryan has made to this point, and really Rowan, who has come out of obscurity into somewhat relevance and getting the rub from Daniel Bryan. And I'm just fearful that it's going to be all about Roman and his gutsy performance and him overcoming the odds and getting retribution, and at the sacrifice and at the expense of everybody else involved in the storyline. I have that fear because it has happened time and time again.
Yeah, I really hope that they don't go that direction, because what they've really done is they put themselves in a bad situation because they really haven't handled Roman's return all that well. He hasn't gone after really much of any titles. He hasn't really been in that picture for a little while now. So the fact that they kind of dropped the ball with that almost puts them in a bad spot where they have to try and prove that Roman is big again. And I just hope that that's not going through Daniel Bryan, because it seems like a lot of Daniel Bryan's role in a match setting now is to get over other talent, which is great when it's used for younger guys who really need that sort of big win on their resume. But I don't want to see it go to Roman Reigns just because, we really screwed up the way we booked him for a few months. So go ahead and demolish Daniel Bryan, kid, and you'll be back on top.
And unfortunately, those comments I can just hear backstage, and it's scary that those are not probably far from the truth if WWE continues to follow their logic that they have over the last few years. So, but I think we've pretty much covered that. I'm just fearful. I'm just fearful of it, but I'm still willing to give it a chance, and I'm willing to see how this plays out. But if my hands were down, my cards were down, my chips were down, and my cash was on the table, I would still bet on Roman Reigns just plowing through Daniel Bryan, and the announcers claim that Roman Reigns is the king of the world once again, and what a gutsy win it was. I mean, that would be my bet. But I wouldn't bet the farm, but if you're going to put a gun to my head, that's my guess. So I want to move on to another piece of SmackDown Live, and this whole thing with Randy Orton and Kofi Kingston. Before I give my thoughts on this, what do you think about this whole storyline in general that's been going on now for a month and a half or so?
Yeah, I think that the whole, the previous pay-per-view, they kind of or SummerSlam rather, they definitely dropped the ball with the ending of the match, and it kind of killed a little bit of the heat. But what's been really interesting, I think, in this feud for me is just how well Randy Orton has performed in terms of playing the heel here. You know, everybody knows that he's good at playing the heel, but the fact that he's actually managed to kind of bring this feud back from the depths after that SummerSlam performance, it just kind of speaks to the way that he can just so quickly jump into that role and feel like a big obstacle. And I think that that's something that's really been missing from Kofi Kingston's reign. And I'm right on the same boat with you, where I think that Kofi's reign has been a little bit lackluster. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but I just think the names that he's had in front of him haven't been all that impressive. You know, I think Samoa Joe could have been a better opponent if they would have sold it better, but for the most part, it's just not enough heat behind the matches that he's had, and I feel like Orton has done a good job of, through his promos and the stupid, you know, doing that over and over. It just really works well to kind of build this feud up and make it actually feel like it means something.
Yes, and people are, I think, missing that point, too, that it's not all about Kofi here, and we all know how I feel about Kofi, and I will just say, in short, again, I just want to reiterate, I don't boo Kofi. I think he's a great athlete. I think that he has had a very successful career, and I am a Kofi fan. I just don't feel he's WWE title material, and I have seen over the last 4 months now, that opinion of him not change. He's a feel-good story that everybody got behind, and he's just the guy throwing pancakes who hasn't changed, suddenly is unbeatable out of nowhere for 11 years and has not lost a match since WrestleMania, and throwing pancakes out of his waist. It's to me, it's not what the WWE title should represent. But nonetheless, Randy Orton has done a very good job here. It's like Randy Orton has awoken from his slumber of just being the legacy star who comes out, does his pose on the second rope and then hits an RKO, the crowd pops, and he leaves and cuts a generic promo. And that has been the Randy Orton formula for years now, and it served him well. And I'm sure he's making a fine living doing that, preserving his body, never really going to that next level, just doing what he has to, very smooth in the ring, and just sticking with this, being an active in-ring competitor as long as he can. And I understand and respect that. But something has awoken with Randy Orton here, and I like it. I like seeing the vile, disgusting, sadistic Randy Orton. Obviously, this is PG, so he can only take it so far. He's not going to be kissing, Triple H's wife while he has him handcuffed, as he did back in WrestleMania. Oh gosh, it was like WrestleMania 26 or something like that, or no, 24 maybe. But so it's not going to take it to that level. But at the same time, this is the Randy Orton that I love. This is the Randy Orton that makes me like that character or love to hate him. And right now, it is the most interesting Randy Orton that I've seen in years. He's with the Revival, which I think is a very nice trio. Whether it's a group that sticks or it's just temporary, I don't know. I hope it's a longer-term plan for these three, because I think all three could benefit from being in a stable, because the Revival, let's face it, are kind of boring, and Randy Orton is just that legacy star that has no real direction. So all three, I think, need each other. And Randy Orton RKOing Big E this week and DDTing Kofi Kingston at the gorilla position and taking out Xavier Woods' leg last week. All of it is brilliant stuff. And Randy Orton has said many times he is super comfortable and he loves being a heel way more than a babyface. And boy, does that show every single time that he's a heel.
Yeah, and that's what I absolutely love about him, is that he can just come in and instantly capture that heel heat. He's one of the best at just instantly knowing where to go for the weak points and find those reactions out of the crowd, and it's just so interesting to see him kind of reach a level. I would almost say that he's kind of at that legend killer heat status now that he used to have back when he was doing that gimmick, and it just feels like every time he comes out, there's like this air of disgust that comes out of the crowd, because he's going after someone that's become this Hulk Hogan-esque symbol of goodness, throwing the pancakes out, like you said. It's just kind of that he just comes in and is instantly like, I hate everything about this gimmick. I hate everything about the fact that you used to have a Jamaican accent. I hate the fact that you don't realize that I'm special just for being Randy Orton. And I would actually, at this point, like to see him grab the title from Kofi. I think that him going into chase mode will do a lot for his character and hopefully bring out some more intense sides to him. And like you said, this storyline can only go so far in terms of what he can do for heat nowadays, but I think that there is definitely some potential, as long as they don't overdo it, with the involvement of his family. The letter he read out on Smackdown, for example, that was pretty well done. And I think that if they keep going that direction and let Randy Orton just kind of naturally build off of his heel heat, that this could really end up being a defining moment for Kofi's career and pushing him to that upper level.
It could be. It definitely could be. And maybe it's just me and my personality. I just don't feel as if Kofi Kingston is exciting as a WWE champion. He's the guy that's trying to have the belt make him rather than having him make the belt. And I'm always a fan of not having the prop make the guy, but the guy should make the prop feel important. And well, Kofi Kingston is, again, he's the family man, as you said. He's the wholesome, feel-good family man that we're all supposed to relate to, and I understand all of that. I have a family myself. I get it. But he just doesn't grab me from the New Day that was nothing more than a glorified, albeit very successful, comedy act. And they put on great matches. There's no question. But that's the problem is there's just not the believability for me that's there for him to go from this guy that has in 50-50 booking for his entire 11 years to go all the way to suddenly being a totally unbeatable WWE champion. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and there's been very little character change on top of it. Yes, Randy Orton brought in his family, as you said, with that letter, and had a letter that he wrote out as pretending to be from his son. And yeah, he's making it personal, and we've seen some fire from Kofi Kingston, but he's still coming out there every week throwing pancakes as if nothing's happening, and that throwing pancakes to the audience is the most important thing he's going to do that night. And there's a huge disconnect for me that's there, and I don't know what to do about it, but other than drop the belt. I mean, I think it's time to drop the belt. Would Randy Orton be a contender? Maybe. I think Samoa Joe would be a better contender, and I've said that he needs a heel monster run. But yeah, it needs to be right now, I think, chase mode, and I've said that too for all three champions, whether it's Seth, Becky, or Kofi, all three that won at WrestleMania and now are at the back end of their championship run. I mean, it's just always more fun when you have the face in chase mode, and I hope that we go back to that. I hope that we now get these champions drop the belts. We've had our run. We've had our fun. We can all say thank you to WWE for listening and going through with their booking at WrestleMania. And now it's time. It's just the nature of the beast. It's a cyclical business. It's now time to have Kofi drop that belt and have him in chase mode.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, I feel like Kofi has kind of become kind of the embodiment of, I don't mean to say this in the wrong context, I don't want it to be taken the wrong way, but I feel like he's kind of become an embodiment of some of the worst qualities of WWE, in the sense that, you know, he repeats his catchphrases, he's this big marketing machine of, I got to make sure I do the pancakes while I come out because that's something I'm known for, and that's a part of my gimmick, and it's a kind of a whole problem with the New Day in general. You know, they've kind of pigeonholed themselves into these one parts of their act that almost become necessary, and it just kind of reflects some of where WWE's product has gone, where it's become, you know, making sure Michael Cole says boss time when Sasha Banks come out, you know, saying the big dog every time Roman comes out, you know, kind of those catchphrase moments and things like that. And I think that's a lot of the problem with what has happened to his run, is it doesn't really feel natural because his character really isn't that natural. He's supposed to be this relatable guy, but he's, you know, screaming baby every couple of segments and things like that, and it just doesn't come across as that genuine. And I think if they let him lose the belt and have a genuine story of just going after the belt and maybe even shedding to the side the New Day for a little bit and saying, look, I'm just focused on this and I'm just training strictly to get my belt back. I don't want to focus on throwing pancakes or anything else. I feel like that'll kind of bring out more of what I like to see in a champion, you know, somebody who's intense and looking for that edge.
I think you're right, and I think that, yeah, this whole marketing machine that is WWE sometimes gets in their own way, and the forced catchphrases, the constant having to have a nickname for everybody, and, well, that's marketing. Well, it's not marketing if you just decide that one day you're this nickname. You can't, just like in life, you can't just come up with a nickname for yourself. It has to happen naturally. It has to happen, you know, in the spur of a moment, and that's how nicknames are born, right? I mean, the Texas Rattlesnake is not something that Jim Ross thought about beforehand. It's not something that was brought up in a board meeting, in a creative production meeting. It just happened out of nowhere. And yes, you could say that's a one-off, that's just a once-in-a-lifetime type of thing, but think about how successful that nickname was. It totally fit. It does not fit to call Roman Reigns the big dog. All I can think about is the American Badass, when The Undertaker was calling himself the big dog because he was the big dog in the yard, because that actually was who he was in real life. He was the leader of the locker room. And now it's just contrived to have Roman Reigns out there with, you know, a Michael Cole constantly saying it, and Vince McMahon screaming in Michael Cole's ear to make sure he says it every 5 seconds. And yeah, so with Kofi Kingston coming out there and saying baby, which I don't think has ever really caught on. That whole baby thing, like no one's you know, singing along to that. It's just like this forced thing that he does. I don't know. I find it childish. It doesn't work for me anyway. So I don't know. I mean, I think that while the WWE marketing machine is getting in its own way, because the New Day also is a super big cash cow for WWE, which is why I don't think they'll ever actually officially break up. They just make too much money for the company between all of the merchandise they sell to kids and like the cereals and the unicorn horns and God knows what else they sell. I mean, thousands of things that they sell from that one idea of the New Day, and very successful. Not taking away anything from anybody, but they're also sacrificing legitimacy and emotional connection for, we got to keep this cash cow going, guys. We're a business. I mean, so there's that too. For him to disassimilate himself from that group may end up hurting Kofi's wallet. I mean, because they get royalty checks. So, I mean, there's a whole money aspect to this too that I don't think people are really talking about. And they're a business. WWE is a for-profit company. They're a publicly traded company. They have people to answer to, and stockholders, shareholders. I mean, they have financial reports they need to provide to Wall Street. And when you think about breaking up a group like New Day, you better think long and hard about it with all the money that they bring in.
Yeah, that's exactly where the problem lies, is that, it's no longer about letting the gimmicks and the catchphrases and the things like that come organically. It's all about forcing it down our throats. And I think really WWE needs to take a page from other companies. One in particular, I've just seen a lot recently of ads for Doritos that don't even include their name or logo. It just basically describes the product. And that type of marketing kind of is genius in a way, where it's just you're letting things organically be talked about and come from it, and just let the marketing happen on its own. And one of the perfect examples of that in the WWE, one of the biggest selling T-shirts probably in the history of the company, is the Austin 316 shirt. And that just came from an organic promo where Austin was just out of a match and he cut a promo, and it was just something that happened. And that moment ended up being one of the biggest cash merchandise opportunities that WWE ever had. And you look at the New Day, and they kind of can't break up now, and that destroys a little bit of the magic of anything can happen in wrestling, where it just feels like they're just going to always be this constant comedy act, roll out the introduction and let Big E do his talking segment, and then Xavier Woods come out with the trumpet or trombone, whatever it is, and come out and do his shtick with that, and then the pancakes with Kofi. It's just, it just feels like it's never going to go away. And part of the magic of the business is that, you can go from being Hunter Hearst Helmsley to being Triple H. You can go from being Stunning Steve Austin to Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's those kind of organic transformations that make wrestling and make the marketing of wrestling so genius when it's working right.
It is. It's just the fact, I think, that they're such a massive marketing machine that they think everybody has to have a nickname or a cute catchphrase. Instead of just letting things happen, they want to go, well, we don't have time for that. You need to come up with something. Who are you? And so sometimes the gimmicks are forced. Sometimes they do happen naturally. But the organic, natural things that happen, I understand, need patience. You have to have patience for them to happen. And I don't think that Vince has that. I think that he needs a nickname now. You need a catchphrase now. And when it's forced and contrived and just manufactured, it comes off like that. And as human beings, we have a sixth sense for just detecting BS. And when something's not authentic, you just feel it. And I don't care how many times Michael Cole says big dog, it just sounds awful. It sounds contrived. It sounds like they are trying to force that nickname. It's like Vince McMahon. It came from Vince McMahon saying, "You're the big dog." I mean, that's what you are. And I can hear it, and it just says, "Everybody call him he's the big dog now." That's his nickname. It just, you can't force nicknames. Nicknames are not something that should be manufactured or just decided on. It just happens. But I understand their lack of patience, because it doesn't organically happen quickly. It sometimes takes time. It has to have the stars align for everything to come together right for a moment like that to happen, with Austin 316 at King of the Ring 96. I mean, the biggest and most successful selling T-shirt in professional wrestling history did not just happen in a boardroom. Again, that was an organic moment. So, I mean, we're going to have to see where this, tying it back to the whole program here with Randy Orton, I don't think that Randy Orton is ultimately going to take the belt from him. Would I do it? Yes, I would. And then I would have the Revival be the henchmen for Randy Orton to keep that belt. So would I completely rule it out? No, because as we get further away from WrestleMania, obviously the odds increase that Kofi Kingston's dream and fairy tale is going to come crashing to a very, hopefully, just bloody end, I hope, because I'm tired of it. But I think that right now Randy Orton would be a good contender because, honestly, who else would they possibly put the belt on other than Randy Orton right now?
Yeah, and that's exactly the problem that Kofi's had throughout his whole reign, is it's not even all on him, and I don't think that it's really ever on any individual performer now with the way that there is such a machine behind the product, but it really has just been that they haven't built anybody to feel like a legitimate threat. And I was so hopeful when they had Samoa Joe going up against him, and he was slowly starting to choke out, members of the New Day, Xavier Woods, and things like that. That felt like something they could have built, and then they just abandoned it. And it's kind of the same thing that you were talking about, where it needs to be these instant results. It needs to happen now. Everything needs to be heated. Everybody needs to be 100% invested in this. Otherwise, we're going to abandon it in a week. You look at things like Ali and Nakamura. They were supposed to have a feud going on, and then that was abandoned before we even got it started. So it's just like the landscape of the WWE now. It's just so quick to abandon things that it doesn't let anybody really get built up. It's like you get 2 weeks of them being feeling like a contender, and then 2 weeks of them not being a contender at all anymore. It's just such a confusing system with the way they're doing their product now. They're not letting anything have a slow build, and it's making it so that it's kind of alienating the star building process that they've had for so long.
And that's what WWE is built on. People don't understand that too sometimes, is like, the WWE forever and always will be, just like any other sport ever. MMA, football, baseball, AEW, it doesn't matter what sport, what genre, stars are what bring in viewers. End of subject. Stars are what people want to see. Stars are what people buy merchandise for and from. That's how you survive, is building new stars. That's why every single storyline, regardless of how big or small, needs to have the ultimate goal of building a new star or getting somebody who's on the rise even more momentum. That's just how storylines are built. And storylines in baseball, in football, and in whatever other professional sport, basketball, the storylines that happen naturally. Everyone is intrigued by storylines and potential matchups. And you want to see the best of the best go at each other. And it's the same with WWE, obviously in a much more controlled environment. But ultimately, it's the same premise no matter what you're watching. And sometimes I feel like with the 50-50 booking, there's nobody getting any favors done by 50-50 booking. Nobody benefits. When you have a storyline that is going nowhere fast, and ultimately, let me just put it like this. If you have a storyline that is from start to finish, it ends, I don't know, say it's a 2-month-long story. And at the end of that story, you have both guys at the same level they were going in, you could call that story a failure. Because you cannot have a storyline that does nothing for either guy ultimately. Otherwise, why bother? It is in a controlled environment, you're trying to create new stars, and when you're not, even at an incremental level, I don't care how small the progress is, you have to deem that storyline a failure.
Exactly. And I think a lot of what's happening is, like you said, when you compare WWE to other sports, you look at things like football. It's not like, a random Monday night football game. They're just going to decide, okay, we're going to make these two teams rivals. They have to have had some sort of history built up there before to make it feel real. You can't just decide that randomly this one-off game is going to now be a heated rivalry. It's never, the Giants versus the Cowboys happens because they have history against each other. They're in the same division. There's things that attract to the fact that they would be more competitive when they compete against each other. And that's a lot of what's missing in WWE now. You're not letting things build up slowly. You're not letting people say, this enemy that I used to have matters because it's going to come back later. If I get attacked, it ends up having to always be my new rival of the week, the flavor of the month that's coming in to try and take my belt, or, that's trying to knock on my door or whatever it is now, it's always, it feels like it's just going to force somebody to come in quick, have some beef with them just in time for the pay-per-view. Okay, let's wrap it up. And that's the type of booking that lends itself to not letting anybody progress further than they already were.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely on the same page with the philosophy here, and I don't know always that WWE has that goal in mind. They're just like, what's entertaining? And they're so focused on the entertainment that they forget the reason they're there is to make stars. And everybody loves a good story. Everybody loves to see, like, if you're a Yankees fan or a Red Sox fan, you love when they get together because there is a huge backstory to both teams in the whole rivalry. Arguably the biggest rivalry in sports. Cowboys and Giants. Look at the history there and the heated history, the just rough history of those two teams. Obviously, with them starting in week 1, I mean, you have the story right there. So this is what sports is all about because we're human beings. We like to get emotionally invested. And when you have an environment that you can control the narrative and you can't just make a storyline that ultimately gets somebody over and elevates one or both guys or gals, you have to look in the mirror and reevaluate what you're doing and why you're doing it. So, but moving on a little bit more of a SmackDown Live here, I want to touch on Ali and Buddy Murphy. Personally, just my quick thoughts on this. I thought this was a really good match, and I honestly didn't think that Buddy Murphy was actually going to be the one to take the fall because Buddy Murphy over the last 2 weeks has really been built up as far as going toe-to-toe with Roman Reigns 2 weeks ago and having the match of, my God, I wouldn't say the match of the year, but it was up there in maybe the top 20 matches of the year. Very good match. He ended up beating Daniel Bryan clean last week and then loses to Ali here in the King of the Ring tournament, albeit a very good match. I was a bit surprised at the outcome.
Yeah, I was too. I definitely think that it made sense, but it does kind of bring up that worrying 50-50 booking kind of talk again, because it just seems like, both of them are trying to be pushed at the same time. So the positioning of them in the King of the Ring tournament was already a little bit odd. But then to have Buddy Murphy take a loss after such career-defining wins the past 2 weeks, it just kind of it puts a sour taste in your mouth. But my hope is, and I just recently wrote an article about this not too long ago, is that they have bigger ideas and pushes in mind for Buddy Murphy, where they're going to put, more concentration on the fact that he is such a talented performer that he should be getting right into the mix while he is hot and allowing him to maybe go up against the Roman Reigns, the Daniel Bryans, those sort of feuds are the type of thing that he could really use. So having him maybe stay involved with that Roman and Daniel saga is a good thing for him. So that was kind of a way of trying to reestablish some of the momentum Ali had before they just destroyed that right off of the bat as well. So maybe it's just kind of a little bit of damage control. That's the most hopeful idea of it anyway.
Yeah, I hope so, because while Buddy Murphy was labeled as the best-kept secret, obviously he's not the secret anymore, as Corey Graves alluded to on SmackDown Live. He's not, but Buddy Murphy is super talented. I'm really... I didn't follow him before he got onto the main roster, so I can't speak to that. I just simply didn't. But when he came onto the roster, he doesn't have a very marketable look, I'll be honest with you. I mean, at first glance, you'd look at him and go, all right, well, he's in good shape. You can tell that he is certainly keeping his body in peak condition. And, he looks like he could do some cool moves. And until he gets in the ring and he starts going toe-to-toe with guys, you don't really fully see the potential in him. And so that's why when he had that breakout performance against Roman Reigns 2 weeks ago, I said this could be a launching point for his career. I was a huge fan of that match. I said that if WWE is smart, they're going to use this as a launching point and continue to build momentum for Buddy. And I wasn't saying at the time, and I didn't say then, I won't say now, that it should not be Roman Reigns or Buddy Murphy going after the WWE Championship and throw him right into the main event. My point was that he just needed to get a little momentum. He needed to continue to just become and stay relevant. Put him in maybe an Intercontinental Championship picture. But to have him now cleanly lose to Ali, who has been all but missing from the roster since he had his injury. He went and did these weird promos where he's on the street with his magic powers healing people from being alcoholics and prostitutes or whatever he was doing on the streets, to being in the ring and defeating Buddy Murphy. I was a bit disappointed by it. Very good match as I expected. I was just a bit disappointed in the outcome based on what we learned about Buddy Murphy over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good point. I think that his in-ring work is vastly ahead of things right now. I think that he is learning how to be a character in the WWE and kind of sell himself on that aspect. But just the in-ring ability is there, and it just shows that there's real potential for what he can be and what he can achieve. And I think that it comes back to the 50-50 booking, where it just gets worrying when you have such strides and then immediately have something take the wind out of the sails of that. So that's a little bit concerning and a little bit worrying. But I think that the future is definitely really bright for Buddy Murphy and his push going forward.
I think so too. So I'll remain optimistic for Buddy Murphy. All right, well, moving on a little bit to the women's division here, and Bayley versus Lacey Evans. Your thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, so I've gotten to the point where I just really, and I hate to say this with any wrestler, but I really just can't stand when Lacey Evans gets into a feud now. It just feels like she's really not ready to be in this position, and it's kind of WWE damaging her almost more than it's her damaging herself. And it just really feels like she needs some more time in NXT or something. I mean, she took that Bayley to belly suplex, and it was just such an awful sell job. And you can see the moments where Bayley is yelling out the spots. There's that one GIF going around now of her screaming arm drag to her right before it happens. And there's just so much wrong with her in-ring ability right now, and I don't really feel like the character is hitting all that well either. It's a little confusing. A heel who's trying to make everybody good. It's a little confusing. It doesn't really seem to line up with the direction that the women's division should be going in. I think that they should let the more organic characters develop, like how Bayley's push did, and let those sort of things happen rather than keep bringing Lacey Evans into it when she doesn't really feel like a big deal or that she's ready for it yet.
Yeah, Lacey Evans, I think ultimately at the end of the day will be fine. I think she's got a lot of things going for her that just haven't quite put themselves together yet. She was in a program right away with Becky Lynch, and they had a couple of good matches. None of them were really noteworthy that you'd write home about and rave about, but ultimately she did have those moments that overshadowed those positives with her match with Charlotte, for example. That was, I don't know, it was a couple of months ago. That was ultimately just a complete disaster. It was bad. Let's just flat out call it what it is. It was a bad match, and against Charlotte, who is ultimately one of the best competitors and one of the most pure athletes that WWE has. So for her to come in, and I don't know what to make of her gimmick either. I'm a little bit back and forth on it. She is unique. She stands out. She speaks a little bit slow, maybe a little bit too slow to enunciate her words, and maybe that's the point, to annoy us. And if she's a heel, then job well done. You did what you were supposed to. But I just feel she's a little too gimmicky, maybe, and she's so focused on her gimmick and not so much what she should be, and that's improving her in-ring skills, for that matter. She's not quite there, as you said. I mean, she feels as if she should be at the top end of NXT rather than in the middle of WWE. And I don't think that's a knock on Lacey. She just needs a little more time. I think the potential's there. I think her drive is there. I mean, she's a former Marine. She has the credentials. She has a great look. She's attractive. She's got everything that you'd look for in a WWE wrestler. And right now, she just hasn't put it all together, and that's okay. That's okay. She just needs time. And I think if they're not going to put her back in NXT, I don't think they will, that live, non-televised events are going to be her best friend.
Yeah, I just think that it's kind of strange that they forced her so far too, because there's not a lack of good women's competitors in the WWE right now. I mean, you can look down at NXT and probably find 3, 4, 5 different names that probably would have made more sense in the feud with Becky Lynch. So it's just kind of confusing that they're forcing her to this point in her career so quickly without really any build up. And it does go back to that kind of what have you done for me lately kind of situation where they're trying to force everything to happen now. And I think what really would benefit her is to kind of cool off from television for a little while instead of trying to force this gimmick to work. I think she should come back with maybe a rebranded, gimmick, or at least, give it some time so that when she comes back, it's like, oh, it's a big deal that she's back, as opposed to just, oh, okay, she's instantly challenging for a title again without any real selling as to why she's gotten there. So I think that it would have made a lot more sense if she would have built up slowly and made her way to those moments, as opposed to just throwing her right into the deep end and saying, let's see if you can swim.
Yeah, and that's what they did. They just took her and said, hey, we see something in you, and I don't know who made that call. I don't know what exactly they were seeing in Lacey. And again, there have been much, much worse selections in terms of, who should be in the women's division and who should be called up. You could even make the case that Bayley was brought up too soon, or at least maybe the case that WWE has mishandled her from day one. I think that there's a very solid case there. You have Bayley, who was one of the most popular NXT women's stars of that brand, and brought her up, and there was an instant positive reaction for her because she was the lovable underdog, and have really destroyed her character to the point where when you listen to her reaction, yeah, it's still cheers, but it's kind of just people sitting there going, yay. It's very soft. It's not overwhelming. People aren't screaming their faces off. It's just kind of like, okay, when Bayley's here, she's like the cute little girl that is isn't too overconfident, still has a little bit of self-esteem issues, but at the same time, they've also brought a lot of arrogance to the Bayley character that is undermining what made her so successful in the first place, being shy, kind of reserved, not sure of herself, to sometimes being super arrogant, and that is not endearing to the Bayley character. So, did they bring up Bayley too soon? I don't know if it's that as so much as it is WWE just completely botching her entire run on the main roster.
Yeah, I completely agree that that's exactly what they did with her. I mean, the whole cashing in immediately at Money in the Bank scenario, I don't think that did anybody any favors. I feel like her having the Money in the Bank would have been a genius thing if they would have actually let it play out over time, rather than rushing it along and saying, okay, we need to make her the champion now while she's at her peak. And it wasn't really even at her peak necessarily. I feel like, she peaked in terms of what she could accomplish in NXT, so it did make sense to call her up and bring her up and get her going into a program like that. But to have her hold that Money in the Bank for a little while, feel like a threat, and have the fans get behind the idea of her becoming champion, as opposed to just saying, we'll give you what you want right now, it just really seems like Bayley could have used some time to chase after it and really feel like she was earning something as opposed to just giving something right off the bat.
Yeah, and they just wanted to hotshot it. They were just kind of going, hey, well, you haven't heard from Bayley in a while. Let's not only have her win the briefcase, but have her win the belt the same night and get a buzz going. And that's exactly what the thought was, with no real direction. Think about what Bayley has done since she's become SmackDown Women's Champion. The answer is not a whole lot. She hasn't done much of anything other than just kind of flounder around with different opponents. And hasn't really had a spark. It's just she's just kind of there. She's that solid women's champion. But you still, in the pecking order of WWE, feel as if Charlotte is superior to her, because she is. And that's not really a knock on Bayley. It's more on the knock of creative really deciding to get behind Bayley, and maybe it's a slight character change. Maybe get rid of the side ponytail and start acting like an adult. I don't know. But the fact that they still position Bayley as champion, but yet in the back of their minds are saying Charlotte's really our woman here, but we'll put the quote belt on Bayley to appease the fans. But Charlotte is ultimately, at the end of the day, the person that we're looking towards to be a true women's champion. I just feel that way. I feel that way with Roman Reigns and the Universal title. Even though the title's not on Roman, the focus of every show, start at the beginning and at the end, especially at the end, is on Roman Reigns and the whodunit. Especially on SmackDown for the last, how many months, right? It's been the whodunit. So while the belts aren't on Charlotte and Roman, the focus certainly at times is on them, as if to say, yeah, the belts aren't there, but they're still they're still in our eyes at the top of the list.
Yeah, and I think it kind of is interesting that Charlotte's promo work has kind of spoke to that a little bit as well, where she said, her match at SummerSlam with Trish Stratus was overshadowing the Bayley Ember Moon match, which was 100% accurate. It always feels like Charlotte is this creeping presence and force that's going to come in and take the belt off whenever she wants to. And that's great for her as a character, but it is a bit damaging to the rest of the division, especially to the current champion that she takes the belt from. So you have to do a little bit of both, where you balance that out and make it so that it's not so much just making Charlotte this immovable object from the women's division. And I think, letting her be off to the side and do her own thing is good, and lets her kind of cool off from things and then come back into the title hunt. So I think, letting other people challenge at Bayley, like Asuka or something like that, would have been a brilliant way to let her start establishing herself as champion. But instead, now I feel like it's more likely that Charlotte's just going to take the belt from her, and we're going to kind of start from square one with both, where Charlotte's going to be champion again and everybody's kind of sick of that, and then Bayley has the option of chasing back after the belt. But with the way WWE abandons things, it might just end up being another flavor of the week who comes in and challenges Charlotte.
It could be, and Charlotte she is that looming presence that's always there as kind of that dark cloud over every women's champion that's not named Charlotte Flair. She's just that cloud that hangs around and follows everyone around that you ultimately know is going to eventually come raining down, and is going to make her presence known, that she is, anytime she wants, could be in the title picture. And I don't, like you said, it kind of comes at the expense of everybody else, and that's not a great thing for everybody else other than Charlotte Flair. So, look, I think ultimately Bayley needs a character shift. Lacey Evans needs to just stay off TV, as you said, for a while. Go to the live events where nothing is televised, and get your experience in there. Pay your dues there. Get your character solidified there in front of a live audience, but it's not on camera, so you get the best of both worlds, and you're really free to make mistakes and do whatever you need to do. But a couple other things I want to talk on before we wrap this thing up is the Miz, who came out, and he ended up getting Sami Zayn to come out, and it was a setup for Nakamura to end up giving the Miz the Kinshasa not once but twice. Now, Sami Zayn has been floating in and out of rivalries and really has won only one match that was a tag team match since his return, and has done almost nothing since then. So, and it's a shame, because I'm a huge Sami Zayn fan. I think he does a great promo. He's great in the ring. I don't know what they're doing with him. Now they put him with Nakamura, which may end up overachieving what they have on paper as what they ultimately want this team to do. What do you think about where Sami's position, where Nakamura's position, and this feud with the Miz?
I think it's one of those kind of happy accident situations where it's like they've kind of ruined everything to do with Sami Zayn as a legitimate competitor at this point. He's turned into a really talented jobber, and that is such a sad thing for somebody who really has potential to, be something great. His promo work is excellent. He really comes across as a genuine heel who has a kind of a deep hatred for what the fans want and want him to represent. And I think that it was so lost on how they've made him lose so much that him coming together with Nakamura, it's almost the only thing that makes sense to try and build him back up. It's just sad that it had to be him losing so much to get there, but the way that he handled the segment with Nakamura, I thought was absolutely brilliant. Him narrating the beatdown was excellent. Him laughing like a hyena on the floor as Nakamura did the beatdown, and it was just so geniusly done, and it just speaks to how talented Sami Zayn is at getting things over on the promo and segment side of things, that it's almost confusing that they wouldn't let him be a single star, but it also plays so well with what Nakamura needs because he's not talented on that aspect because of the language barrier. So it works so well. It's just a shame that it had to be these two combined to make this happen.
Right, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I just think that right now both guys need each other because they're both lost. And even, as Intercontinental Champion, I should not be saying that as an Intercontinental Champion to an Intercontinental Champion about one. It should be that the Intercontinental Champion has direction, he has a clear opponent, and all this, and it's not the case. Shinsuke feels as lost as Sami Zayn, who hasn't won a match since he came back. And that's just crazy to think about where Shinsuke was main eventing WrestleMania a few years ago. It's just a crazy fall from grace. And now you have Sami Zayn, who did this whole critic of the critic things, and I thought was great, and got a lot of heel heat, and is well-spoken, and he just, for whatever reason, was just not chosen by management to go on any sort of winning streak with zero momentum, and then gets put with Shinsuke, and as you said, it could very well be a happy accident. I hope it is, because Sami Zayn and Shinsuke deserve better. They deserve better, and this feud with The Miz could turn into nothing. It could be something. WWE does need more tag teams. They had to invent tag teams on Monday Night Raw to make sure they had enough for their tag team turmoil tournament. They had to just pull them out of thin air. But this team of Shinsuke and Sami Zayn could turn into be more than what I think they think it could be. And that's a good thing because I believe both guys are capable of overachieving. And ultimately, I think that's what they'll do, is overachieve. The other thing I want to talk to you about is Kevin Owens and his ongoing feud with Shane. Shane was not on Smackdown Live, but Kevin Owens continued to placate with his feud with Elias, and a kind of a sloppy stunner to Elias. And Kevin Owens has yet to master the Stone Cold version of it. Maybe that's a little unfair, but if you're going to do the stunner, I mean, come on, man, make it nice, right? So he continues his feud with Elias, who in part screwed him last week with Shane McMahon as the referee and getting a quick 3 count, eliminating Kevin Owens from the King of the Ring. So what are your thoughts on this whole Kevin Owens, Elias, Shane McMahon program going on?
Yeah, so I just want to start off with saying that I think they missed a huge opportunity to recreate the Montreal Screwjob, being that, Kevin Owens is Canadian and a McMahon is involved in screwing him over. I really would have loved to have seen Elias slap on the sharpshooter and the bell quickly rung and everything like that. So I just want to start off saying that was a huge miss on WWE Creative's part. But regardless, the actual feud with Elias and Shane McMahon is just so far gone from being heated at this point. It just feels like it's died down so much, and now Kevin Owens is kind of playing this, I'm kind of a nice guy when I feel like it. Oh, it's okay that you find me, Shane. I just want to hang out in your office and talk buddy. It just feels like he went from feeling like Stone Cold to feeling like a completely lost version of what they were trying to create. It seemed like they had it so well decided what he was going to be, and now he's just kind of lost in the shuffle and ends up having to go in and stun Elias again. And like you said, that was one of the worst stunners that I've seen in quite some time, actually, since Shane McMahon's botched stunner. At least he sold it well with kind of the dead man fall at the end of it. But I just feel like they've kind of lost direction with what greatness they were creating with the Kevin Owens character.
Kevin Owens right now, he had a lot of good momentum going with the babyface turn, the true babyface turn that he had. It wasn't just the fake one that he did with the New Day honorary member for a few weeks. And they incorporated the stunner, one of the most beloved moves of all time, and to a guy that is genuinely funny. Kevin Owens is a genuinely funny guy, well liked backstage. He's an easy guy to get behind because he doesn't look like the typical wrestler. Looks kind of like the common man. He was hanging out at bowling alleys and various places with his family in several vignettes before his return. All of that before his return near WrestleMania time last year. And so what they did with Kevin Owens, I think they did a lot of good things and a lot of things right. And incorporating the stunner, attacking a McMahon, all of that. I mean, and they did good. And Kevin Owens' promos were even on point, talking about the fact that Shane McMahon was taking up TV time in lieu of guys and gals that deserve it. And so all of that, and him being the voice of the fans, to this guy that is suddenly just decapitated and neutered by the fact that Shane McMahon fined him, and he turns into this cowering dog that goes, "No, Shane, please don't fine me." Like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, that completely halted all his momentum when he did that last week. And the feud with Elias is like, what is this? I mean, this has to end at Clash of Champions one way or the other. It has to, for the sake of Kevin Owens and all involved. I don't care what the stipulations are. This program needs to come to an end, and come to an end quickly in just under 3 weeks now.
Yeah, I really feel like it should have ended at SummerSlam with Kevin Owens coming up to Shane and saying, why aren't you putting up the stipulation of you have to quit afterwards? I understand the heel heat that they generated with the idea of saying, okay, he's going to say no, of course not, because that's not a smart business decision. But just the idea of having Kevin Owens just beat the pulp out of him and just make it so that he can do whatever he wants, hold the microphone up and say that he quits. Make him do that, even though he said he wouldn't. Something like that would have been such an epic way to end off this Kevin Owens, Shane McMahon feud and salvage it. But now it feels like it's gone on for far too long, and it just feels like Kevin Owens is losing momentum at a rapid rate, especially the more that he kind of has the sad puppy dog eyes and comes into Shane McMahon's office.
That's the sad part of this whole thing, is he has just lost his edge. He's not saying a whole lot. I was thinking that when he was coming in doing that to Shane last week and begging for his decision to be reversed, that he had some kind of plan, that he was going to, say F you, Shane, basically, and give him another stunner, and I don't care what you do to me or how much you fine me. I don't know, something. There was a way to spin it so that Kevin Owens doesn't look like a fool and a coward and just this guy that's driven by money to, at the sacrifice of his pride. And that's what's, I think, really the disconnect here, is that Kevin Owens was essentially bought out by Shane McMahon to cower to him because he has control over how much he, can fine him, and therefore control over his career and his character. I'm not a fan of it. I understand why they implemented the fine. That's supposed to get heat on Shane, but it should have backfired with him continuing to get his ass kicked by Kevin Owens, and it didn't. It just turned into Kevin Owens being this sobbing mess about a story of his family and what $100,000 means to his family. And it just, I don't know. It did some damage, and they need to stop the bleeding very quickly.
Yeah. I definitely think that's definitely the case with him, and I would have loved to have seen something, Stone Cold-esque swerve with him coming in and destroying some property, oh, you're going to fine me $100,000? Well, you basically own the WWE, so how about I destroy $100,000 worth of property? Something like that would have been such a better way to capture that moment.
There's so many ways to do it other than cowering. I mean, that is the out of all options available, that is the option that I would absolutely not choose, is Kevin Owens just turning into this sulking mess and trying to make it about his family. And, we're all supposed to relate because, of course it affects his family. Your family is the most important thing. Not in professional wrestling, not in that context anyway. You just don't go there with a babyface that's got that much momentum that's supposed to be this anti-authority figure. It's the opposite of what you want to do, but they they did it, and it has done a lot of damage. I mean, listen to the reaction Kevin Owens got this past week. It was lukewarm at best. That should be your focus group feedback right there of, hey, like, what did we do to get this reaction from Owens? Why is he not getting what he used to get even just a couple weeks ago? Well, there's your answer. I mean, so one other thing I wanted to talk to you about SmackDown Live is, and then we'll wrap this thing up, is Chad Gable versus Shelton Benjamin. What did you think of this match?
Well, I definitely feel like it kind of was lost on the card a little bit. I feel like there were some reports that it was originally supposed to be a longer match, and I feel like that really could have given it a lot more edge. It just kind of felt like it started off like it was going to be a competitive contest, and then they kind of buried Shelton Benjamin almost immediately in the match, and that was a little confusing. There were some moments that felt great, like the catching swing to the barricade moment really felt like some old school Shelton Benjamin where you're like, oh, this guy's going to be a star. He's got to be. Look at the things that he can do. But they didn't even give him an entrance for the match, which just kind of speaks to the way that he's been treated his whole career. It's almost like he's an afterthought. Oh, he'll put on a good match, but don't bother to think of a storyline or do anything creative. I had a running theory that his whole not speaking and looking off and dazing was going to be WWE's kind of weird attempt at counter-programming Orange Cassidy in AEW, but instead they dropped that just so that he could spit off some short jokes before the match. So it just shows that they really don't have anything for Shelton Benjamin, and he's just kind of forced to be this hand that makes everybody else look better, and it just really doesn't do a whole lot for anybody when he's been doing that for so many years now.
And when Chad Gable gets in the ring, this guy can go, and I don't understand what it is about Vince McMahon when he has this short man complex that anybody under the height of 6 feet should just be reprimanded and should just be nothing more than the butt of a joke or be involved in the 24/7 title picture. That has just been Vince McMahon's philosophy, and you can see that happening. And why are we going after Chad Gable's height? And furthermore, why is Chad Gable standing there like he was the last guy picked in gym class? He just doesn't stand up for himself on top of it. I'm not understanding this. As talented as Chad Gable is, and as talented as Shelton Benjamin is, they made it all about Shelton Benjamin being the bully that goes, haha, you're really short. And it's just, it's so sophomoric and shallow and one-dimensional. Like, where do you go from there? Like, oh, okay, he's short, but Rey Mysterio was even shorter, and he was a world champion. I mean, like Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, they were 5'9", 5'10", and they were world champions. Like, so this whole idea of guys poking fun at other guys for being short, or even the fact that in the women's division, how much who was it? Alexa Bliss getting picked on even by the announcers for how short she was, 5 feet of fury. Why do we need to point this out as it's supposed to be some kind of defect in their ability to perform? I'm not on board with it. I mean, maybe that's me because I'm 5'7", whatever. I don't care. But maybe it's some personal vendetta. But I just don't follow the reasoning for this sophomoric need to just point out people's height and they must be this high to ride this ride. It just feels so like it's from the mind of Vince McMahon.
Yeah, it really does. It feels like it's kind of a pandering to Vince type of writing style, like what you spoke about earlier, where it's just like you're coming back to trying to appease Vince with everything that you're doing, and he pops for the short jokes, so we got to throw in a nice handful of those in there. And apparently there's some rumors that they might change Chad Gable's name to Shorty G, of all things. So that really kind of speaks to where they're at with Chad Gable in terms of what Vince McMahon sees of him. It's like almost if he can look eye to eye with you, then he doesn't want anything to do with you. It's like you got to be towering over him to appease him. And it just really lost a lot of the momentum of the match. It felt like things were kind of building up, like it was getting interesting, and then the commentary just lambasting over and over again about, he's so short, he's so short. Corey Graves couldn't shut up about it the whole match. And, overall, it could have been very good. The finish was great. It was better than just a regular old roll-up. But instead, it kind of just felt lost in the fact that they just had to make sure that everybody knew that Chad Gable was short the whole time.
Right. I mean, they're focusing on things that just don't need to be focused on in the realm of WWE. Like, we can use our eyes. We know that we have an opponent that is shorter and is not as physically gifted maybe as his opponent. But that's what we can discern from ourselves. We don't need to be told like children that somehow because somebody's 4, 5, 6 inches shorter than another that puts them at a disadvantage. We have watched wrestling long enough to know that anybody can beat anybody on any given night, which I don't like, but we've been trained to believe that. And I don't like them pointing out that somehow it's a negative that he's shorter. It's such an alpha male mindset that is nothing more than creative appeasing Vince or Vince McMahon coming up with it himself. And my God, if they choose the Shorty G, I just hope that the paychecks that Chad Gable's cashing is enough to make up for his pride just being destroyed on national television. It's just it's so lowbrow. But it is what it is. As you said, to the match itself, I liked it. And I don't think the crowd was super into it because they didn't have a whole lot to invest themselves into. But from a fundamental perspective, I mean, these two are pros. They put on a good match. Could the match have gone longer? Absolutely. And we end up getting Chad Gable getting the win in that roll-up, I guess, surprise victory. But I don't know. I like the match. I just don't like the short jokes. And please, Shorty G, I don't know where you heard that. I'm hoping it's just a rumor and there's no substance to that.
Yeah, that would just be a career killer. I mean, it's just so strange to think that, to try and get somebody over, you would point out a flaw of what they are. I mean, they're supposed to be physical specimens, supposed to be these hulking presences every time they step on your screen, where it's like you're looking at that and you're saying, oh, they're definitely going to win their match tonight just by the sheer look of the person. And so to downplay any trait of the person that you're trying to build up as a force, it just seems so strange. And to have somebody come out to the name Shorty G, I mean, you might as well just go ahead and put him back on 205 Live and be done with it, because he's going to be getting the same fan support there as he does on the main program when he gets that name change. So it just doesn't make any sense why they go these directions that more bury the talent than they actually promote it.
This is the opposite of what anybody needs to grow their character. And I actually was really, really big fan of Chad Gable, and when he was in a tag team, and I thought that he was supposed to be Kurt Angle's son, which ultimately ended up being, I can't think of the name. He was in a tag team with
Jason Jordan.
Jason Jordan, who is MIA as well. But to me, Chad Gable would have been the more logical choice to be the son of Kurt Angle, because he had more of a look as Kurt. He had the wrestling style that I think appeased to Kurt's style. I wasn't a fan of Jason Jordan to begin with, but I think, and rumor was that they chose him because he had a bigger physique. He was the big guy in the room, and they didn't want to go with somebody that could be potentially looked at as maybe a dwarf version of Kurt. It's so childish, but I don't know. I just hope that for Chad Gable's sake that they don't do that to his career. But all right, well, Zach, is there anything else that maybe we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
One of the things that I think, the ending of the show, I think, was a very important thing to focus on, with Daniel Bryan getting the slapping of Rowan and everything like that. I think it does lead to an extension of that storyline, so I'm hoping that, it will be ended in a satisfactory way, as we spoke about before. But I think that it's just very interesting to show that it can lead to some possible implication of some turns in the future, because Daniel Bryan could come out innocent in all of this, and he's just getting speared for the sake of getting speared for other people. So I think that's an interesting point to look at going forward. And one of the other things, too, I think with that is the fact that Rowan is kind of looking a little less monstrous every day while that's happening, too.
Yeah, Rowan right now is he doesn't have any talking time. I mean, maybe him having a voice other than standing there as the guy with the big orange beard would help. And he didn't get a whole lot of talking time in the Wyatt family or when he was in the team with Luke Harper. So, I mean, yeah, Rowan needs a shot in the arm. I don't know if he's Eric Rowan or Rowan. That seems to change by the week with all of these stars losing their first names. And when you look back at the list of guys that we take Antonio Cesaro, for example, or Rusev. Rusev actually had a first name, too. I just can't remember what it was. So, right now, Rowan, I think, needs something other than being the disciple of Daniel Bryan. He needs to have his own identity, and they never really knew what to do with Rowan, and I think that is also showing itself here. Daniel Bryan slapping Rowan, was that just a setup to have him, try to get the audience to buy all in that Daniel Bryan is actually not behind it, and Rowan got frustrated, and the setup was, well, Rowan just lost it and decided to just walk away from Bryan as Bryan got frustrated with him and slapped him 5 times. I mean, so there are a lot of elements to look at here. I mean, ultimately, we discussed them, but I just think it's going to end up with Bryan versus Roman, a very straightforward. It's somehow revealed that Bryan is the culprit.
Yeah, and I think that it's really a sad thing because I think that Rowan could do a lot of good in a tag team division, and I think that having Luke Harper come back in this storyline would help with that. And it's just so sad. One of the biggest takeaways, I think, from television this week in WWE is, are they completely giving up on the tag division? I was... Interestingly enough, I kind of brought up the idea that with an article that I wrote about how that Strowman could go after the tag titles to kind of just as something to build himself up and then quickly drop them, with how he had Nicholas as I believe that was the kid's name, Nicholas, that he had as the kid partner. So it just kind of shows that even though that was kind of just a thrown out there idea that, it could build him up and then he could just drop it to a good tag team shortly after that, now they're just putting Ziggler together with Rude, and it just is so crazy to me that with AEW being so heavily focused on how good tag team wrestling is, that they're kind of just throwing it to the side and saying, we'll just put the belts over here and we'll make this new tag team this week and forget about all the other old ones we established and then broke up.
Vince McMahon has not exactly had a great history of focusing on tag team wrestling. I mean, when you look back at the history of it, the tag team division has never, ever, in the modern era of wrestling, been the focus of the WWE promotion, WWF promotion. Never. It has always been single stars and the single championships that have been the focal point of the product. And I understand why. Because tag teams are meant to create stars, just as stables are. Stables are made to create stars so that you can create these guys, have the sum of the parts be, well, there's an expression, I just can't think of it, I'm very tired. But have all 3 or all 4 or all 5 guys, however many people are in that group, ultimately become bigger stars when they come out of that group, and when the group disbands. Groups are never meant to stay. They're always meant to create new stars and disband 99% of the time. And look at any great group that ever existed in WWE. D-Generation X imploded. I mean, the corporate ministry imploded. Legacy imploded. Who else is it? Triple H's Evolution group imploded. I mean, so that is just what it's meant to be, to create new stars. So that's what I think about that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that point, and it definitely has been a trend in WWE for a very long time. But it's just, as I said, I'm a huge fan of, the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, Edge and Christian, that whole era of having those huge big fight feel moments with the TLC matches and things like that. So it just really blows my mind that they can have so many talented teams in WWE right now, arguably one of their most talented rosters ever, not necessarily just in terms of tag teams. I don't think that's even the case, but just in general, the talent that's on that roster and the pairings you could make. I mean, you look at similar personalities like Miz, Sami Zayn, that could be an interesting tag team. It just, there's so many options that they have in place, and yet they just so continually choose to say, basically, screw the tag division and anybody involved with it.
Yeah, it's a shame because there is a lost art there, just as there's a lost art with managers or valets. It's just something that is pushed to the side in 2019. I think it eventually will make a comeback because it's just the cyclical nature of professional wrestling. And a lot of times what's old is new again. So eventually it may make a comeback just as valets and all that stuff might, but I don't foresee it in the near future. You know, the tag team belts on both brands feel somewhat relevant, obviously with Bryan or with Strowman and Rollins holding the Raw tag team belts. It's instantly adding credibility. But I think that's the peak of the SmackDown belts were when they were around the waist of Bryan and Rowan. It felt right, and I was hoping they would go on a crazy long run with those belts, and it just started to fade away, and it's a damn shame because I am a tag team wrestling fan that I think often. I just become educated to the fact that WWE is never going to focus on tag team wrestling as their priority, and we just have to unfortunately accept that in 2019.
Yeah, and I think that's why you get, the wandering eyes that start to look over at AEW, and you start to get the people who are paying attention to other things because they don't get what they're looking for. They're missing certain pieces of what they want from a wrestling program. And I think that's where the direction of AEW sometimes gets a little bit of criticism because they do try to kind of be a jack of all trades, master of none. But that is something that's kind of missing from wrestling, and I think that's where WWE gets distracted in doing things their own way, that they start to lose focus on the fact that there's a lot of other aspects to what made them able to be as big as they are today. It wasn't just what the WWF did. It wasn't just what the WWE did in the modern era. It all is built on the foundation of what everything wrestling has ever done to make a company be a billion-dollar industry like the WWE is now.
Yeah, I really can't add much to that. I just don't ever believe that it's going to be focused to WWE. But again, it could very well be the focus of AEW at some point, and it doesn't always have to be. It just maybe rotate that in every once in a while because the tag teams wrestling can be great. When tag team wrestling's good, it's great, and you just have to have and find two guys or two gals in that ring that have great chemistry. You have to have them come up with a gimmick that works. You have to find, sometimes things that can't be manufactured are chemistry with the two individuals and have them just play off of each other. And so things like that. Tag team wrestling is not easy to do and not easy to find for successful teams, but it's been done, as you said, the Hardys, Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, that whole era when they were doing the crazy TLC matches, and we all remember what those were. So it's been done. It can be done, and look at how high those teams rose, and the success that they had. So, all right, well, Zach, it's been an absolute pleasure. But before we go, I want to remind everybody that Zach will be doing the AEW All Out review. That'll be dropping after the pay-per-view, and once the weekly shows start with AEW, we will be dropping the show every Thursday, so definitely keep a lookout for that. And also let everybody know, Zach, where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at SpotsHigh, and you can also find my articles through some various outlets, but mainly my Twitter account is where you can find me talking all things wrestling.
Awesome. Well, very good, and we are looking forward to seeing and hearing your voice on a weekly basis starting in October, but really beginning with All Out. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm sure my listeners are too, as we continue to expand this show and branch out into different promotions, and one that has absolutely got a different flavor of AEW.
Absolutely. I'm very excited for when the Wednesday Night Wars get up and rolling, and I think that it's an exciting time to be a wrestling fan and an exciting time to have your own podcast to be a wrestling fan, that's for sure.
No question about it. You especially are timing this perfectly. So we are definitely looking forward to it. So Zach, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll have to do this again sometime. I know you'll kind of have your own show, and we won't really be co-hosting, but we'll have to keep a lookout and find another time to do this for sure.
Definitely. It was very enjoyable to sit here and talk wrestling with somebody with a great knowledge like yourself, and I'm just really excited to be a part of such a great program that you've already built, and it just feels great to sit down and have this conversation and to really put such a emphasis on the great product that's coming out nowadays, and just letting that kind of do the talking for us through our own voices, you know?
Absolutely, and like I said, it's always fun to find wrestling fans that you can talk to intelligently about and understand the passion that you have. It's once you find that connection, it's always a blast, and you know you could just talk forever. Wrestling's a topic that just never gets old, never dies, never gets old, and you can just talk about it forever. And I mean, look what we did tonight with almost like 2 hours worth. So, Zach, thanks so much, and we will be talking real soon. And everybody, don't forget, the first show from Zach does drop this coming weekend after All Out.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, take care, Zach.
You too.
All right.